Good morning, everybody. This is Carrie Getz. Welcome to another edition of our podcast series here. And this goes with our book, Jumpstart Your Career in Data Centers. Hope you check out a copy. Today, we are here with Michael. Michael, introduce yourself to us.
I'm Michael Morey. I'm the president and CEO of Bluebird Network. For those of you who don't know, Bluebird Network has two data centers, one in Springfield, Missouri, one in the Quad Cities in Illinois, but we also have an 11,200-mile fiber network that we tie it all together with across the Midwest, Missouri, Illinois, 9 other states. So that's what we do, Carrie.
Awesome. So I think a lot of people forget that when people talk about data centers, they talk about the building and all the guts and stuff. But I think a lot of people forget about how critical the fiber infrastructure is. So tell us a little bit about how you guys go about laying fiber, where you decide to lay fiber, and how critical it is to the data center industry.
Well, I was going to say, people who move into data centers certainly don't forget about the access, because one of the number one things that people look to us for is, especially since we're a fiber provider, and I'll come back and tell you how we lay all that stuff, but especially since we have our own fiber network, they want to make sure that our data centers are what we call carrier neutral, right? That it's not just Bluebird's fiber in there, it's as many as you can have. And we work like crazy to have all of the local carriers plugged into our data center directly. Down in Springfield, we have 5 different carriers. Up in actually in the Quad Cities, we've got over 20 carriers into our facility up there, which is just crazy. When we lay it, we like to make sure that fiber comes in from at least 2 different points in the building, preferably 3. Bluebird really likes to see 3 degrees of access into data centers, because let me just tell you something. 2 isn't enough. I got to tell you, on our network, so separate from our data centers, our network, the fiber stuff, we always like to make sure that customers have 2 routes, their fiber comes in one way and goes out another, because if one gets cut, it goes another. That's okay, because you're likely never to go down, but certainly not going to go down, because we had a situation just a few weeks ago where we were working on maintenance on one direction on one fiber route, and another carrier decided to do maintenance at the same time and took down our other route. So in a network environment, it took us about 35 minutes to get it back up, right? In a network environment, it's expected maybe once every 5 years or 6 years you'll have a little small outage. Data centers, that's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And if you don't have 3 degrees of access with fiber, something like that will happen someday.
I call that the Bubba factor, actually. The
Bubba
factor. When we were writing 942, I was doing a lot of work behind the scenes through somebody at the company I used to work for that was our representative into that standard. But I called it the Bubba factor. And that's the reason why you want fiber coming in at opposing sides of the building or a big difference apart, because if Bubba comes along with a backhoe, you don't want Bubba digging up everybody's fiber. So I call it the Bubba factor.
Well, let me just tell you, Bubba works all over the Midwest. He's really
a prolific dude. He gets around.
Like I said, if you're going to have 2 fibers, put them in 2 places. But if you can get a 3rd route, and it comes in from the 3rd direction. At our Bluebird Underground down in Springfield, we actually have 5 different entrances into our data center. So different carriers come in from different directions. So super important in terms of how we build our fiber network throughout the Midwest. I kind of think about the real things are aerial versus underground. So aerial fiber, let me tell you, Bubba has much easier access to aerial fiber than Bubba has to underground fiber. We find that the outages are significantly higher with aerial fiber. We have less than 0.2% of our entire network is aerial.
Oh, wow.
And that is just places where we could not help ourselves. We couldn't do anything. Like a bridge crossing. There are certain things you can't put it in the ground. In terms of the how we build our fiber when we are running it, it's underground and that's really the way to go. So does that answer your question, Carrie?
It does. So let's talk. And really, when I said people forget fiber, I was talking about as a career path to get in this industry, but I think it's a great path to get into this industry. Certainly learning a lot of the outside plant stuff and fiber terminations and copper terminations and anything structured cabling is a great path for somebody to jump in this industry that's kind of learning about the industry. It's a good foothold to get in the door. Let's talk a little bit about how you guys plan your fiber routes. So back in the day, certainly when cable was coming out, that was everybody used the homes passed test to see if it was worth running one there. But clearly we're kind of past that now because autonomy and we expect cell towers to be able to work and all that kind of good stuff. And all of that uses fiber backhaul. So educate the listeners a little bit on how you guys go about planning, where those fiber routes are going to be and all that kind of good stuff.
Well, the first part that your listeners maybe aren't going to like so much is that we don't do fiber to the home, which is the hottest thing nowadays. So we provide fiber to many carriers that do fiber to the home. We're one of the biggest people to connect to fiber to the home. So most of our fiber delivery is focused on prospective customers, meaning people who need it. For instance, let's just talk about fiber to the home, right? A lot of fiber to the home companies are trying to build fiber in remote rural areas that haven't had it. They've got a lot of federal grants, et cetera. So we talk to those folks and we say, where are you planning to go? And so we will figure out, okay, here's where all the fiber to the home providers are going to go. We actually mark them on a map. And when we start looking at new routes, one of the things we'll consider is where our new fiber to the home provider is going to go because we can connect to them. And we layer on top of that all kinds of other things. Our biggest customers are carriers. Well, let's just talk, you mentioned wireless earlier. We'll layer on top of that all of the locations where there are towers that have microwave connections, right? Because all the towers are really trying to get out of microwave. Okay, so now you got the new fiber to the home providers in the area. You got the towers that don't have direct fiber to them and are microwave. You start looking at the hospitals, banks, government entities, financial institutions, points of presence for carriers, carrier hotels, previously lit towers, because if you have two pieces of fiber to a tower, that's even better. And you layer these onto a map, and you can see where there are concentrations of need. Then we'll go to a thing called Fiber Locator, and I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Carrie, but there's Yep, we'll go to Fiber Locator. We'll layer that on top of that, and we'll go, here's a bunch of places that have lots of opportunities but don't have lots of fiber. Well, that's a good place to go, right? So that is really how we decide. And the other thing is we target an 11-state area: Missouri, Illinois, and the 9 states around it. So this analysis that we're talking about, we do in those areas. And then the other thing we do is we just go and we look at businesses that are 20 people and above in terms of on-site people. We really like businesses that are larger, 10 million up to 100 million and above. You locate those, and you can create. With fiber to the home, they talk about number of houses passed. They know what their percentage of penetration is going to be, et cetera. Well, when we lay those things out on a commercial business fiber thing, we can do the same thing. We can analyze that and say, if I put fiber here, here's my return. And then we look and say, well, which ones am I going to get the higher return on? I've got 12 routes I'm looking at. Well, let's do an analysis on the businesses that are along those routes, the amount of cost to build those businesses, what we believe our take rates are. We do an IRR analysis, and bottom line, it just spits out. It's obvious we should go build here. That's a long explanation, but that's how we do it.
There you go. Well, I think that's good because it helps people sort of understand. And I know the landscape is changing a little bit today with the expectation of all these edge locations that are supposed to be popping up everywhere. and all of those need fiber. So I would assume that some of that's probably going to be custom built just for those kind of scenarios too.
Well, again, ultimately, what drives us building is who needs it, who's willing to pay for it, right? So if you're somebody that you need something at this location and there's not fiber there, and they come to us, I mean, we'll get you there, and we may do it on a custom basis, but I've got to get enough money from you to justify me spending. Let's just throw out a number, $3 million or $500,000 or whatever. And if the company is sound, so that I know I'm going to get paid, and the financials of the deal make sense, I will go build it. That is not true of all carriers. There are some that just say, "Here's, we'll only do these situations." They don't like to do any of those custom things. We do lots of custom work, Harry, lots of it.
And I think too, as we start building out more and more content delivery networks and try to cross the digital divide, I think we're going to see certainly more fiber in the ground to a lot more maybe fixed wireless locations and cell towers. And I know those are popping up around too, just to make sure that people have access.
Yeah, that's true. We were mentioning kind of edge places to locate things. You're focusing on the fiber component of it, but also people are, when they're trying to get close to the edge, they're looking for places to locate it. We talked about 2 data centers we have, but the other thing that we have, because we are a network provider, is we have what we call points of presence. Think of them as buildings with with racks in them, and we actually think of those as edge data centers, because we actually sell access in those buildings to people who want to locate maybe content. I mean, there are a number of major content providers that are building national networks and looking for places to put their equipment. And so when we contract with them, many times they're not interested in being in either one of our data centers. They want to be in those points of presence that's along our fiber. And so we have numerous people that we sell a space in those POPs to.
Sure, I think it's the whole landscape really is changing. I mean, of course, this industry is pretty cyclical. We went from centralized to decentralized, back to centralized, and now a lot of those are decentralizing again because, well, that's just how we do it in this industry. But it's because technology is a lot of the drivers, and certainly demand it drives a lot of those conversations and a lot of those decisions. And I think everybody listening can agree that nobody is telling users to stop using data anywhere.
What? They aren't?
No. Shockingly enough. But to your point, I mean, that means that you have to put all these extra data centers and figure out where that content's going to be and make sure that you don't have loopholes and you don't have bandwidth hogs and you don't have places that are horrible bottlenecks that just cause issues in the fiber. And I know that the practice of running fiber generally also means that you run some dark fiber, and that then can be accessible to other folks down the line. But so from a data center perspective, though, you said you've got some folks in your data centers that are doing some of this edge content. Where do you guys have plans for additional data centers? What are your growth plans? What's it looking like for you guys?
So our focus, let me define what I mean by an edge data center, right? Okay. So traditionally, edge data centers have been within 20 milliseconds of the workload that you're trying to access, right? And so that's how we decided that originally we had our 2 data centers, one in the Quad Cities and one in Springfield. If you look at our fiber network, you'll see that they are perfectly located so that they're, I can get you anywhere. If you're in one of those 2 locations, I can get you to anywhere on my network in 20 milliseconds or less. But as you said, the industry is changing. Okay. And so now I hear people talking about the edge being 5 milliseconds or less. Okay, so I can't have these big hunkin' data centers, every 50 miles, right, to do this. But when I call an edge data center, so let's call my 2 existing data centers a regional data center, And let's call my edge data center these 10 by 20 buildings that I locate all over my network, just to initially used to be to store network equipment. But now it's to store those workloads that need to be within 5 milliseconds of the edge. And so our plan is to continue to grow and densify those. So I'm trying to get those kinds of edge facilities, let's call them, okay, because it's not just a data center, it's also for me to house my network equipment. I'm trying to get them within 5 milliseconds of every place within my 11 state region. And, we're slowly but surely getting there. We have probably 35 of those facilities across our network right now. And, they aren't, you aren't getting like, it's not like a data center where you have gobs and gobs and gobs of people there with huge power loads, et cetera. There's one or two people that want to be in each of these locations. If you're lucky, one, right? I'm one of the customers, so that's one of the customers for that place. And then maybe there's one other person. I mean, you talk about your FANG companies. I mean, they are buying. I mean, I've got one facility that I actually doubled the size of it for one of those companies, right? Because they needed to be in this location. This was where they had these places all over already, but they needed to be here. So I already had a pop there. I already had land. I already had a building, but one building wasn't enough. So I went ahead and added another building on my piece of land. I already had fiber there, and I put them in there. So your question was, as a long answer to your question, what are our plans for expansion? My plan is not to build more regional data centers. My two is fine. I can get everywhere on my network within 20 milliseconds or less from my two. I don't need more. My plans are to continue to densify what I'm calling edge data centers, which is within 5 milliseconds, which we use these 10 by 20 pops, these points of presence throughout my network.
Sure, sure. Well, and I think that's kind of a big important note for anybody that's considering a career in this industry, is that really drives home the fact that these jobs are everywhere. You don't have to live in Loudoun County to work in a data center. You don't have to live in Loudoun County to lay fiber. I mean, there's fiber projects going on all over the United States right now, and the opportunities are everywhere. So how do you guys go about looking for talent and bringing new talent on? What are
Well,
what do you guys do for that?
so we try to post jobs on our website. I know a lot of people do, but we post in all the time, and they are ubiquitous. They are across the Midwest. Carrie, you're right. So that's one thing we do. We go out for recruiters. But listen, if somebody's interested in Bluebird and they don't see a posting, call our HR department and send us a resume. We keep track of them, etc. But it is hard to get great people nowadays. It is hard. What the transformation that occurred with COVID, where everybody now can work anywhere in the world from any place in the world.
In
Um,
theory. Yeah.
well, that doesn't work for technicians,
It does
right?
not. Yeah.
It does work for engineers. It does work for software people. It does work for a lot of the positions that we have in our company. So, yeah, just watch our website, etc. But this industry as a whole is going crazy. That they are popping up all over. So I'm not sure what I would do if I were somebody looking for a job in our industry. First of all, I'd make sure I was trained well. And there are a lot of great technical schools out there. Here in Missouri, we've got the Rolla, which is the University of Missouri Technical. It's basically Missouri Tech, and that is a great place. We love to go get people from there. We also try to get in touch with the Veterans Administration's facilities that are helping former vets get jobs. We love veterans. We love people that have taken the time to educate themselves on the industry and in technology, and especially if you've been in the military and you've been in the communication side of the military, you've got a lot of broad experience.
You do.
Probably,
Very
probably,
applicable too.
yep. So I think that's probably how we're doing it. We're probably not as effective as we should be. So
Yeah, I think that's kind of a problem across the industry. Everybody's doing what they can to hire people, but it's tough. I mean, it's a very competitive market for sure.
Well, that tells you. I mean, for job seekers out there, right? That this is an industry worth going after. I mean, there will always be jobs here, and if it doesn't work out at one company that hires you, there's always going to be somebody in our industry. Everybody always needs more bits, more often, in more locations. At a lower cost every single year.
For sure. Absolutely, for sure. Well, we're getting close to our time here. So, what do you want to leave anybody with some parting words? What would you say?
Parting words. I think I just said them. This is fiber and data centers is the place to be. And if you have any doubt about what's in the future for it, I get questions all the time like, are your wireless going to go up in the air, or is all of your data center going to go out to the edge? Are you going to have anything? The answer is yes and no to all of them, meaning every part of our industry is going to grow, and it's going to get deeper. It's going to get more entrenched because information is what's driving our economy. So that's what I would leave our viewers, our listeners.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Well, everybody, we want to thank you for listening today. If you want to get in touch with Michael, his contact information will be in with the podcast description, or you can go to Bluebird Networks and find him there. For the rest of you, thanks for listening. We hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to you being on another episode. Have a great day.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks.